Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Let me take you back to the night the air in the room changed, and nobody but me seemed to notice. There was a sharp clink of a fork against a wine glass. Someone laughed too loud. Napkins fluttered slightly from the breeze, slipping in through the sliding doors. It was the kind of dinner party where the laughter feels just a little too polished. The smile stretched too wide. The wine disappears a little too fast. And then it happened. 10 words. Spoken casually. Delivered with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Talitha, who knows how to handle anything. Discreetly. No one moved. No one except my wife, Letha, who smiled back at her boss across the table and raised her glass. I didn't drink. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I stared at her hand. Those fingers wrapped so effortlessly around the stem of the glass, remembering how those same hands had held mine just the night before in the hallway when she said, "You're the only one who really sees me." What a joke. The people around us chuckled, pretending they got the joke, pretending it wasn't a grenade tossed into the middle of the room. But I knew. I knew something snapped in me right then. Quietly. Like a bone fracturing without breaking the skin. I excused myself. No scene. No questions. No accusations. I just stood, buttoned my coat, and walked out. And the worst part? She didn't stop me. Didn't follow. Didn't text. She just let me go. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't even cry. I sat in the back booth of an empty diner, staring at a cold plate of pancakes I never touched. I must have looked like a ghost, just sitting there, trembling with the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it suffocates. What was that sentence really saying? What had she done that needed to be handled? And how long had I been sleeping next to a stranger? The next morning, I returned to a house that felt rented. I opened her laptop. I shouldn't have. But I did. And what I found? That sentence at the dinner party wasn't just a bad joke. It was a breadcrumb, leading straight into the fire. I don't know what kind of man I became overnight. Something inside me switched, like I was suddenly standing outside my life, watching it through a fogged window. After that dinner party, after that toast that made my spine go cold, I walked through the front door of our home like it belonged to someone else. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just stood there in the hallway staring at the framed picture of us from last year's anniversary trip to Portland. She was laughing in the photo, genuinely laughing. And me? I looked so proud. Like a fool who didn't know a storm was already building right behind him. It was around 4:30 in the morning when I sat down at her desk. I wasn't thinking about boundaries. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. All I knew was that I couldn't sit with this silence anymore. She hadn't called. Hadn't come home. Not a text. Nothing. Just that one sentence, that one smirk, that one invisible thread now wrapped around my chest like a noose. Her laptop was still open, lid down, but humming faintly. No password. She always said passwords were for people with secrets. Well, the screen lit up. Her inbox was still open, an old email chain with someone saved under the name TS, Studio Supply. I almost skipped past it. Almost. But something about it, it wasn't professional. The subject line read, that room. I clicked. My stomach flipped. The conversation stretched back for months. It wasn't graphic. Nothing that could be screenshot and held up like a flag in court. It was subtler than that. Inside jokes. Teasing lines. Mentions of nights she was too tired to come home on time. And then there were calendar invites with no context, labeled with meaningless numbers. 3:15, 7:40, 11:30. I clicked one. It was the same night she'd told me she had a work dinner that ran long. The same night I had left pasta cold on the stove, waiting for her to walk in. The same night I had ended up apologizing the next day because she looked exhausted. And there it was. A reply from him, Buckley, sent at 12:02 a.m. that night. You left your scarf. Still smells like paint and jasmine. Come get it whenever. Paint and jasmine. I sat frozen. We didn't even have jasmine in the house. That scent wasn't for me. And in that moment, the weight of 1,000 quiet lies came crashing down like a roof during a storm. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I just closed it, calmly, and sat there staring at the wall. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's cold, quiet. It creeps in through the cracks of everyday moments. And before you know it, you're standing in a life that isn't yours anymore. I didn't sleep that night. When she finally came home at 8:12 a.m., hair slightly damp, carrying a smoothie she claimed to have grabbed on the way back from yoga. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her and said, "We should talk later." She kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. But everything had. What I didn't tell her then was that I had already made a copy of everything. Every email, every timestamp, every calendar note. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. The problem was, I thought I had discovered the worst of it. I was wrong. 3 days passed like a blur of motion and stillness. I was there, physically. I showered, I ate, I answered emails. But mentally, I was trapped in a loop of that sentence from Buckley and the cold trail of emails I'd read at 4:30 a.m. I kept trying to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I was overreacting, that it was some horrible misunderstanding or an inside joke I wasn't meant to hear. But that denial dissolved quickly every time I saw her move around the house like nothing was wrong, like my silence was just one of my phases, like her secret hadn't already set something on fire inside me that wouldn't go out. She didn't know I knew, and I let her sit in that ignorance because I needed more. Something direct, undeniable, concrete, and I got it sooner than I expected. Saturday evening, I received a group message invitation on my phone, some kind of open-table dinner at a downtown fusion spot, organized by one of her coworkers. She had mentioned it in passing the night before, but told me, "It's just gallery people, you'd be so bored." I said nothing and nodded. But now, seeing the open invite, I realized she hadn't just omitted it. She had expected me to not want to come. She was counting on me staying home, like always. I made a reservation under another name. I arrived 10 minutes early and requested a corner table, 2 seats away from where the gallery crowd was supposed to be seated. The waiter didn't even flinch. I guess awkward solo diners weren't uncommon. I kept my head low, my ball cap tilted forward just enough to keep me hidden in plain sight. Then they started arriving. I spotted her immediately, red coat, black heels, laughing too loudly. Buckley arrived a few minutes later. They didn't sit together, but their eyes did all the talking. There was a tension between them that could have powered the whole block. What happened next was something I was not prepared for. At some point between the appetizer and the wine refill, Buckley stood and walked to the back patio. A minute later, Lorna got up, murmured something to her friend, and casually followed. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then I stood and walked slowly, heart pounding like a war drum, toward the back. I kept my distance, standing just inside the patio doorframe, shielded by a tall wooden planter and a thick hanging fern. I didn't expect to hear much. I thought it would be whispers, maybe light flirtation, some teasing, enough to hurt, sure, but still vague enough to be dismissed by anyone but me. I was wrong. I heard Buckley say, "So, have you told him yet?" Lorna's voice, "No, I don't think he suspects anything." Buckley laughed. "You're giving him too much credit." Then came the line that made my skin burn. "It's almost sad. He still looks at me like I'm the same girl who wanted to build a life with him." Silence. "Sometimes I feel guilty," she added. "But then I think, he doesn't really live. He just exists. I needed more than that." My chest collapsed inward. I didn't even breathe. I stood there, my hand gripping the wooden frame of the doorway, so tight I thought I might snap it off the hinges. I thought about our wedding vows. I thought about how many times I'd made sacrifices for her happiness. How I'd said no to job offers in other cities because she loved the gallery. How I let her decide the tempo of our life, thinking that love was compromise. But apparently, she thought it was just settling. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But that conversation felt more intimate than either of those things. It was raw honesty, just not meant for me. I walked away before they saw me. I left the restaurant, took the long way home, and drove through 3 different neighborhoods trying to remember what I'd done wrong. I tried to think of the moment our love had turned into convenience for her. But there was no single moment. It was slow, subtle, wrought disguised as routine. That night, when she came home, I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. She slipped in beside me, smelling faintly of vanilla and smoke from the patio heaters. She curled into me, whispered, "You okay, baby?" I didn't answer. I was no longer the man she saw in her head. But she hadn't seen the man I was about to become either. The next few days felt like I was living in a cracked mirror version of my own life. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt real. Lorna moved around the house the same way she always did. She still made coffee in the French press, played the same indie playlists while folding laundry, and complained about the same squeaky gallery door. But now, all those details, those normal little rituals, felt like props on a stage set up to fool a man who was never supposed to hear the lines delivered off script. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be smarter than that. For the first time in my life, I didn't react. I observed. I took mental notes of every lie she told that week. The ones where she claimed to be running errands that didn't match her Google Maps history. The fake gallery emails she forwarded to herself to make it seem like she had late meetings. The nervous tapping she did with her left fingers anytime I asked her anything casual. I wasn't looking for an explosion. I was waiting for confirmation. Then it happened. On Friday afternoon, while she was out grabbing dinner with old college friends, I opened the bottom drawer of her writing desk. That drawer had always been a catch-all for random junk: phone chargers, old receipts, hair ties, expired coupons. But that day, it held something else. Tucked beneath an empty glasses case in a dusty notebook was a plain beige envelope. No name, no address, just weight. Inside were 4 photographs. Printed, not digital. Grainy, but clear enough to know exactly what they showed. Lorna and Buckley. One photo had them sitting close together on a bench at a riverside park, heads tilted toward each other, her hand on his knee. Another showed them walking side by side out of what looked like a boutique hotel entrance. The third, him holding her wrist lightly as she laughed, the way she used to laugh with me when we still meant something. And the last one, them at a table. Candlelight. 2 wine glasses. Her leaning in, whispering something into his ear, eyes closed like she was safe there. On the back of that last photo, someone had scribbled a date. 2 months ago. I remembered that night. I'd been home alone, nursing a stomach bug, texting her to pick up soup. She told me the pharmacy was closed and she'd be home late. I remember apologizing to her the next morning for being needy. I sat down on the floor of the office with the envelope in my lap, staring at the photos until the light in the hallway changed. I couldn't cry. It's not that I didn't want to. I just felt hollow. Like even my grief was afraid to show up. Why would she keep these? Why print them? Why hide them where she clearly didn't think I'd ever look? Part of me thought they weren't for her. They were for me. Like some twisted message in a bottle. A breadcrumb trail. Maybe she wanted me to find them. Maybe she didn't have the courage to end things outright and needed me to break first. To be the one who said, "I'm done," so she wouldn't have to wear the blame. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of that clean exit. No, I was going to let the truth walk into the room on its own and take a seat at the table. And so I waited. When she came home that night, I didn't mention the envelope. I didn't mention the photographs. I simply handed her a glass of wine and told her I made pasta. I asked her how dinner with her college friends went. She smiled and said, "It was good. Quiet. Just what I needed." And I smiled back, like I believed her. She had no idea I had already seen the truth with my own eyes. But here's where it starts to twist. Because less than 48 hours later, a second envelope showed up at our door. Not hidden, not secret. This one was mailed. No return address. Just my name typed neatly on the front. And what was inside changed the way I saw everything. It was a Sunday morning when the envelope arrived. No knock. No doorbell. Just the dull thump of something dropping through the mail slot as I stood in the kitchen watching toast burn, wondering if she could smell guilt on her own clothes when she got dressed. Lorna was still upstairs, humming as she straightened her hair. She was meeting her sister for brunch. Or that's what she said, anyway. These days, every word out of her mouth felt rehearsed. Precise. Practiced to the syllable. I walked to the front door and found a white envelope resting face up on the mat. No handwriting. My name was typed, centered, crisp black ink on thick white paper. Just Grover. No address, no stamp, no sender. It hadn't gone through the post office. Someone had hand-delivered it. I closed the door behind me and just stood there in the hallway, staring at it like it might bite. My stomach sank before I even opened it, because something about the clean formality of it felt heavier than the envelope itself. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No closing. Just 4 lines typed on an old typewriter. Ink slightly uneven, like the words had been pressed into the page instead of printed. You don't know everything. She's not the only one lying. Ask her about the lake. And be home on Tuesday night. No name. No signature. Nothing else. I read it 5 times. Then again. And again. My first thought was, this is a prank. A cruel, elaborate prank. But that didn't make sense. No one else knew what I'd discovered. I hadn't told a soul. Not even my oldest friend, Theo, who I normally ran to with every crisis. This wasn't gossip. This was something else. I walked upstairs and peeked into the bedroom. She was still getting ready, lips parted as she applied her makeup. Calm. Effortless. She glanced at me through the mirror and smiled. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just checking if you want a coffee." "No thanks," she said. "I'll grab one on the way." I didn't ask her anything. Not yet. I just stood there watching her as she checked herself one last time and then left with a quick kiss on my cheek. I stood frozen in the doorway long after she drove off. She never once mentioned a lake. That day, I tore through drawers, folders, boxes. I checked our shared calendar, old text backups, her journal entries from the past year, the ones she thought I didn't know she kept. Nothing about a lake. But then I found it, an email from last summer, titled Cabin Cleaning Reminder. Sent from her to herself. No text in the body. Just a location pin dropped near a rural lake 2 hours north. We didn't own a cabin. We never stayed at one. And I was in Denver during that week for a company workshop. I remembered because it was the one trip I almost didn't take. I had that sinus infection, and she convinced me to go anyway. She even packed my suitcase for me. I remembered thanking her. By evening, I had pulled up satellite maps and identified the road. There were only 4 cabins on that lake, and one of them had a rental listing that matched the photo from the pin she dropped in that email. I clicked through the photos. In one of the listing images, through a blurry reflection in the glass patio door, I saw a silhouette that looked familiar. It wasn't Buckley. It was someone shorter, broader, someone else entirely. And I realized then, whatever this thing with Buckley was, it wasn't the full story. It wasn't even half the story. Someone else was involved. And someone wanted me to find out. I barely slept that night. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. I didn't know what I was walking into, but the voice in my head wouldn't stop whispering that I wasn't the only one being deceived. When Tuesday finally arrived, I made sure I was home before sunset. I turned off all the lights. I sat in the living room. I waited. And just after 8 p.m., I heard it. Not her key. Not her car. A knock. 3 sharp knocks at the back door. I stood up, heart racing, every part of me screaming to not go. But I did. I opened that door. And what I saw standing on the other side was not who I expected. Not even close. He was older than I expected. Maybe late 50s. Weathered face, salt and pepper beard, and a tan work jacket that looked a decade past its prime. His eyes were sharp though, cutting, like someone who'd seen enough and didn't bother hiding it anymore. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't smile. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting for this door to open for a long, long time. "You're Grover?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila folder, handed it to me without a word, and then turned to leave. I stepped forward, grabbing his sleeve. "Wait, who are you?" He paused. "Let's just say I've been cleaning up after people like your wife for a while now." And then he walked off into the night, disappearing down the alley like some ghost I'd accidentally summoned. I closed the door slowly, heart thundering in my chest, and locked every bolt like it would somehow protect me from whatever truth was now sitting in my hands. I didn't open the folder right away. I just stared at it while the TV played some muted crime drama in the background, and the lamp next to me flickered like a nervous witness. I already knew the folder wasn't going to bring me comfort. It wasn't a gift. It was a detonator. Inside were photographs, far more than the ones I'd found in her desk. These weren't just snapshots. They were surveillance grade, zoomed, dated, cataloged. Lorna wasn't just with Buckley. She had been meeting 2 different men. One I didn't recognize at all, tall, lean, almost delicate-looking with a tattoo on his wrist. The other was more disturbing, because I did recognize him. Marin, her boss before Buckley. The same Marin who wrote her recommendation letter for the promotion she turned down 2 years ago. The same one who retired early, citing stress-related burnout. The same man she told me was creepy, but harmless. And yet, there they were, meeting up in a hotel parking lot, sitting in a cafe 2 towns over, walking hand in hand by the lake I had only just discovered existed. There were timestamps, dates. Every one of them correlated with times I remembered being home alone, cooking dinner, folding laundry, or cleaning up after the dog because she said she'd be late. But what shattered me the most, what made my entire body go cold, was the short transcript clipped to the last set of photos. It was a typed conversation, a recording, between her and Marin. It read like something out of a confession booth laced with venom. She talked about how she felt trapped with me, how I was safe, but invisible, how she needed more, that she kept me around because I was useful, because I paid the bills and never asked questions. Then she said something I will never forget. He's the kind of man who'll let you drown slowly just to avoid making waves. That line did something to me. She didn't just cheat. She dissected me, turned me into a joke, a character flaw, a shadow of a man too weak to fight for himself. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. I had let things slide. I had ignored signs. I was the man who cleaned the house while she left lipstick stains on wine glasses in someone else's kitchen. But not anymore. I sat there until morning, surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't know I was living, and made the quietest, most serious decision of my life. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront her the way she expected. I was going to erase myself from her world. Let her come home to a house that echoed with absence. Let her find the fridge empty, the drawers bare, the silence sharp. Let her realize what it feels like when someone doesn't make waves, but disappears beneath the surface completely. But first, I had to set the stage. And the way I started that, with a phone call she never saw coming. It took me 3 days to pull the pieces together. 3 days of pretending. Pretending I didn't know. Pretending to care about what she said over dinner. Pretending not to notice the new perfume that wasn't hers, or the fact that she suddenly kept her phone face down. I moved like a ghost in my own house, and I doubt she noticed. She was too distracted, too wrapped up in whatever fantasy she had convinced herself she was entitled to. She still kissed me on the forehead when she left for work. Still asked if I wanted anything from the grocery store, even though she hadn't actually brought anything home in weeks. I smiled and nodded like a puppet made of skin and silence. Because I knew what was coming. I knew what I was building. I made one phone call that changed everything. The man's name was Lawson, a lawyer Theo had mentioned in passing last year when I was helping him navigate his aunt's estate. A quiet fixer, he called him. The kind of guy who didn't advertise, didn't show up on billboards, but got things done with surgical precision. I told him what I had, what I'd found, and what I planned to do. He didn't flinch. Do you want revenge or removal? He asked. I want freedom, I said. He paused. Then let's make her sign the papers without even realizing she's the one who lost. We met twice. No email trails. No documents sent over Wi-Fi. Just old-school folders, burner phones, and a level of strategic planning I never knew I had in me. And when it was time, when the house was wired with silence and my fingerprints were slowly vanishing, I left. But not without a message. That Tuesday morning, she came home from her overnight staff training session to find the house just as she left it. Or so she thought. Her clothes were still in the closet. The mail still stacked near the door. Even my toothbrush was still in the bathroom. But the silence was different. It wasn't resting. It was watching. She didn't notice the cameras. Hidden in vents. Nestled behind air fresheners. They weren't for catching her anymore. They were for me. To watch how she reacted when she realized I was no longer playing the fool. At precisely 11:35 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. And that's when my voice, pre-recorded, detached, composed, came through the line. By the time you hear this, I'll be gone. But don't panic. You won't need to look far to find the trail I left. Check your inbox. And your closet. She froze. The camera caught it. Her shoulders tensing like a wave of ice had just washed over her spine. She walked into the bedroom and opened her laptop. There it was, one email. No subject line. Just an attachment. Inside that PDF was a full compilation of every photo, transcript, GPS tag, and the full rental agreement of the lakeside cabin signed under a fake name. Not hers. Not Buckley's. Her sister's fiancé. That was the third man. That was the final betrayal I hadn't wanted to believe. The folder the stranger left me? It had tucked away a second copy, clear shots of her and Grant, her own future brother-in-law, tangled up in ways I'll never be able to erase from memory. My voice continued in her ear as she opened the attachment. You didn't just burn us. You lit matches in other people's homes too. I hope whatever you found out there was worth it. Because from now on, you'll find only silence when you look for me. She dropped the phone. I watched from my hotel room, streaming the camera feed in real time, as she paced the hallway, opened doors, called my name like I might be hiding in the closet, waiting to say, I forgive you. But there was no one. Only echoes. Then she ran to the closet. Her suitcase was missing. Mine too. Every drawer she checked was hollowed out. Every trace of me, gone. Like I never existed. She grabbed her phone and started dialing, but stopped when she saw the wallpaper. It was a photo I'd changed the night before. One I knew would crack her wide open. It was the four of us. Me, her sister Camille, and Grant. Smiling on the back patio last Thanksgiving. Except I'd added a fifth face to the collage, the manila folder, opened wide, with a caption underneath. Some family traditions shouldn't be repeated. She screamed. I muted the feed. And smiled. But it wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction. It was relief. Because I didn't need her to beg. I just needed her to feel what it's like to stand in the ruins of a life she thought no one else could burn. I disappeared. Not in the dramatic way. No passports or fake names. Just a clean, quiet exit. I moved 3 hours north to a town no one had reason to visit, rented a small house overlooking a forest trail, and finally, started hearing my own thoughts again without her voice echoing in them. I left the cameras behind. The house. The past. I even left the man I used to be. Because that version of me, the one who bent until he splintered, the one who apologized for needing respect, he had served his time. He didn't deserve what happened to him, but he also didn't know how to live for himself. It took time. I won't pretend it didn't. Some nights I still woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. I still checked the front porch expecting a package that never came. I still opened the old email account once in a while, half expecting a message that said, I'm sorry. But it never came. What had come, though, was peace. It started small. A bookstore clerk remembering my name. A neighbor bringing over soup after my first winter storm. A dog I fostered named Marley who refused to sleep anywhere but curled up by my feet. I started writing again. Nothing big, just little stories about people who got lost and somehow found something better by accident. And I realized I wasn't writing about other people. I was writing about me. Lorna did reach out eventually. About 3 months after I vanished, I received a letter. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a 3-page handwritten apology. She said she didn't know why she did what she did. That she had sabotaged the one person who had never asked her to be anything but herself. That she hoped, someday, I could forget what she took from me. I didn't write back. Because I hadn't forgotten. But I had forgiven. And there's a difference. I learned that forgiving someone doesn't mean they come back into your life. It just means you stop carrying their weight when you walk. And the day I stopped dragging her ghost behind me, I walked farther than I ever thought I could. So, if you're listening to this and wondering how I turned that sentence at a dinner party into a new life, just know this. Some betrayals break you open, but some open the door to who you were meant to become all along. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've made it to the end of this story, I'd love to know. What moment shocked you the most? Or maybe share a time you found out something you weren't supposed to, and how it changed you. Hit the comments, subscribe if this story hit home, and remember, sometimes walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning. See you in the next confession.